A little runaway girl is caught off guard while giving a mysterious liquid to a millionaire's son. But when the man discovers what she gave his son, everyone is shocked. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The small vial trembled in Willow's dirty hands as she approached the wheelchair where Jasper Hawthorne sat, watching the other kids play basketball at Central Park in Asheville, North Carolina. The grey-green liquid inside the handcrafted bottle emanated a potent aroma of mountain herbs, making the air around the 4-year-old girl seem charged with mystery. "Here, mister," she said in her sweet but determined voice, extending the vial to Jasper. "This will make you walk again." Theodore Hawthorne, who was watching his son from afar while talking on his cell phone about business at the furniture factory, felt his heart leap when he saw the scene. His 52 years as a successful businessman had taught him to distrust strangers, especially when it came to Jasper. The 16-year-old had lost the use of his legs 3 years ago in a skateboarding accident that still haunted Theodore's nightmares. "Hey, what are you doing?" Theodore shouted, running towards the two, his leather shoes hammered on the park's stone path, echoing among the historic brownstones that bordered the area. Willow didn't flinch. Her bright little eyes, framed by disheveled hair that hadn't seen a comb in days, stared at Theodore with an impressive calm for a child her age. Her torn and dirty clothes contrasted with the determination emanating from her small, thin body. "No need to yell, mister," she said, keeping the vial extended to Jasper. "I just want to help. Granny Hazel taught me that this plant heals legs that don't move anymore." Theodore stopped abruptly, as if he'd been punched in the gut. The name Hazel echoed in his mind like a ghost from the past. His grandmother Emerald always spoke of a woman named Hazel, a respected root doctor in the region who knew ancestral secrets of healing through mountain plants. But that had been 15 years ago when Emerald was still alive. How do you know that name?" Theodore asked, his voice trembling slightly. Jasper, who had been silent during the conversation, finally spoke. "Dad, let her explain. It's been 3 years, and no doctor can give me hope of walking again. Maybe—" "No," Theodore interrupted, but his voice didn't carry its usual firmness. "We're not going to delude ourselves with quackery." Willow tilted her head, studying Theodore's face as if she could read his thoughts. "You're scared," she said simply. "Scared to believe because you've already suffered so much. But that fear is hurting your mister too." The child's words struck Theodore like well-aimed arrows. For 3 years, since the accident, he had become obsessed with finding a cure for Jasper through traditional medicine. He had spent fortunes consulting the best specialists in the country, but none had been able to restore movement to his son's legs. "Where did you get this?" Theodore asked, pointing to the vial. "Made it with the plants that grow near the creek, where Granny Hazel taught me," Willow answered. "She said that when you help someone with a clean heart, nature gives strength for healing." Jasper reached out towards the bottle. "Dad, please. I want to try." Theodore looked at his son, seeing hope shining in his eyes for the first time in months. Jasper had been an active kid, dreaming of being a professional basketball player until the fateful day he asked for a new skateboard for his birthday. Theodore had bought it against the wishes of Clara, his wife, who feared accidents. The guilt for that decision gnawed at the businessman every day. "Jasper, this could be dangerous," Theodore murmured, but his words sounded weak even to himself. "More dangerous than spending the rest of my life without walking," the boy replied, with a maturity that surprised even Willow. The girl smiled and placed the vial in Jasper's hands. "Just take a little in the morning and a little at night. And when you feel tingling in your legs, don't be scared. It's a sign it's working." Theodore watched, powerless, as his son smelled the strange liquid. The aroma brought back distant memories of his childhood, when his grandmother Emerald prepared teas and ointments with herbs she gathered in the yard. There was something familiar in that smell, something that touched a part of his soul he had forgotten existed. "How do you know it will work?" Theodore asked, still skeptical. Willow stared at him seriously. "Because Granny Hazel told me that when I found a mister who couldn't walk but had a good heart, I should help, and your mister has a good heart. I can feel it." At that moment, Clara appeared in the park, looking for her husband and son. At 48, she maintained the elegance of a refined piano teacher, but her face bore the marks of 3 years of silent suffering. When she saw the scene, Jasper holding a strange vial and talking to a ragged little girl, her heart tightened. "Theodore, what's going on here?" she asked, approaching with hesitant steps. Before anyone could answer, Willow looked at Clara and smiled. "You have sad eyes, like my granny had before she left, but the sadness will pass when the mister walks again." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about that child that reminded her of stories her own mother told about root doctors and healers. Stories she had never shared with Theodore for fear of being judged as superstitious. "Clara, this girl says she can heal Jasper," Theodore explained, his voice filled with confusion and repressed hope. Willow got up from the grass where she was sitting and shook the dirt off her torn clothes. "Gotta go now. Darla's waiting for me for supper, but I'll be back tomorrow to see how the mister is." She started to walk away, but stopped and looked back at the family. "Don't tell anyone about the medicine yet. There are bad people in town who don't like it when someone gets better without needing their doctor." With those enigmatic words, Willow disappeared among the stone streets of the historic town, leaving the Hawthorne family in absolute silence. Jasper held the vial against his chest. Clara looked in the direction where the girl had disappeared, and Theodore felt as if a hurricane had just passed through his organized and predictable life. That night, as the family dined in tense silence, none of them could stop thinking about the mysterious girl and her words about healing and hope. But what none of them knew was that this encounter in the park was just the beginning of a journey that would test everything they believed about medicine, family, and the secrets they kept from each other. 3 days had passed since the encounter in the park, and the tension in the Hawthorne house was palpable. Jasper had started taking small sips of the grey-green liquid, hiding the vial under his pillow when his parents weren't looking. On the second morning, something extraordinary happened. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible tingling in his left leg. "Dad, something happened," Jasper said during breakfast, his voice trembling with contained emotion. Theodore stopped reading the newspaper, while Clara left her coffee cup in the air, suspended between the table and her lips. Both knew that expression on their son's face all too well, the same hope that had been crushed dozens of times by doctors who promised progress that never came. "What is it, honey?" Clara asked, forcing a calm tone. "I felt a tingling, very faint, but I felt it," Jasper said, touching his leg, "just like the girl said would happen." Theodore felt his stomach churn. As a pragmatic businessman, he had spent the last 3 days trying to convince himself that it was all just a coincidence, that the encounter with Willow was just the desperate delusion of a family in search of miracles. But the genuine expression on Jasper's face shook all his rational certainties. "Son, are you sure? Isn't it just imagination?" Theodore asked, immediately regretting the harshness of the words. Jasper's face closed, and he pushed the wheelchair away from the table. "Forget it, Dad. I knew you wouldn't believe it." Clara watched her son walk away and felt her heart break. For 3 years, she had carried a weight she had never shared with anyone. She knew stories about Hazel, the root doctor. Her own mother, Benedita, had been cured of a serious illness when Clara was only 7 years old, but she had never told Theodore this for fear of being seen as an ignorant and superstitious woman. That afternoon, while Theodore was working at the factory, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She put on a simple dress and left the house with a clear goal, to find Willow and learn more about the knowledge the girl carried. The search took her to the outskirts of Asheville, where the simple houses of wood and brick contrasted with the colonial architecture of the historic center. There, asking curious neighbors, Clara discovered where Willow lived. A humble little house, painted faded blue, surrounded by a small yard full of plants. It was Darla who answered the door. A 73-year-old woman, her white hair tied in a simple bun, and eyes that seemed to hold decades of stories. She studied Clara for a moment before smiling. "You're the Mister's mum in the wheelchair," Darla said, not as a question, but as a statement. "How do you know?" Clara asked, surprised. "Willow told me about you. She said the Mister's dad is afraid to believe, but the mum carries old secrets in her heart." Darla opened the door wider. "Come in, dear. We have a lot to talk about." The interior of the house was simple, but welcoming. Dried plants hung from the kitchen ceiling, and the aroma of medicinal herbs hung in the air like an invisible embrace. Willow was sitting on the living room floor, drawing with crayons on a yellowed piece of paper, but looked up when Clara entered. "Pretty lady!" exclaimed the girl, running to hug Clara's legs. "You came because the Mister is better, right?" Clara knelt down to be at Willow's height, gently touching the child's dirty face. "How do you know these things, little one?" "Granny Hazel taught me to listen to what people's hearts say," Willow replied with impressive naturalness. "Your heart has been screaming for a long time, but you don't let anyone hear it." The girl's words struck Clara like lightning. Tears began to well up in her eyes, and she had to take a deep breath to not cry right there. Darla approached and placed a caring hand on Clara's shoulder. "Hazel was my best friend for 40 years, the elderly woman explained. "When she passed, she left me the responsibility of taking care of Willow and keeping all the knowledge she had accumulated about the healing plants of the mountains. My mother told me stories about a root doctor named Hazel," Clara murmured. "She said Hazel cured a serious infection that doctors couldn't treat." Darla nodded. "Hazel healed many people in this region. But 15 years ago, Dr. Arthur Peterson, who had just arrived freshly graduated from Atlanta, started spreading rumors that she was a charlatan, said she was poisoning people with dangerous herbs." "And was it true?" Clara asked. "Lies," Willow replied with surprising firmness. "Granny Hazel never hurt anyone. She just wanted to help, but the bad doctor wanted everyone to get sick to make money." Darla confirmed with a nod. "Dr. Peterson managed to convince the authorities to run Hazel out of town. She left in the winter of 2008, heartbroken for being wronged. She died 2 years later, far from everything she loved." Clara felt a growing anger in her chest. "And Willow? How did she learn all this?" "Hazel taught her everything in the last months of her life, said Willow had a special gift that she could feel the pain of others and know exactly which plant could help." Darla looked at the girl with affection. "Willow is special, but carrying that gift alone is a heavy burden for such a little child." At that moment, Willow approached Clara and held her hands. "Pretty lady, why haven't you ever told your mister about Granny Hazel?" The girl's direct question left Clara speechless. How could a 4-year-old child so clearly see the secrets she had kept for years? I was afraid," Clara admitted finally. "Afraid that Theodore would think I was ignorant for believing in root doctors. But he believes too," said Willow, tilting her head. "He just forgot, because his pain is too great. His granny, Emerald, knew Granny Hazel. They were friends." Clara's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because when I touched your mister's hand, I saw the memories he carries of his dad. Memories of a granny who made teas with plants and sang old songs." Willow smiled. "Your families have been connected for a long time, but you forgot." Darla served chamomile tea for Clara, who drank in silence, processing all the revelations. The afternoon was passing, and she knew that Theodore would soon be coming home and wondering where she was. "Willow, does the medicine you gave Jasper really work?" Clara asked. "Yes, it does. But the mister needs to really want to get better, not just in his body, but from his sadness too," the girl replied. "And you and your mister need to stop carrying guilt. Guilt makes the heart heavy and hinders healing." Clara got up, knowing it was time to go home. But before she left, she knelt down again in front of Willow. Can I give you something? Money, food, clothes? She asked. Willow shook her head. Don't need money, pretty lady. Just need you to believe with your heart that the mister is going to get better. And to stop being afraid to tell each other the truth. When Clara got home, she found Jasper in the living room, doing secret exercises he had learned on the internet. The boy didn't see her come in and continued trying to move his toes, focused as if his life depended on it. Jasper, she called softly. The boy startled and tried to hide what he was doing. Hey, Mum, you went out? I went out to talk to someone about you, Clara said, sitting next to her son. About the girl who gave you the medicine. Jasper raised his eyebrows. And what did you find out? Clara took a deep breath, knowing she was about to change everything in the family dynamic. I found out that maybe your dad and I have a lot more in common than we thought, and that this girl might actually be trying to help us. At that moment, Theodore came home from work and found mother and son talking in whispers in the living room. There was something different in the atmosphere of the house, a tension mixed with hope that he couldn't identify. What are you two talking about? He asked, loosening his tie. Clara and Jasper exchanged glances, and it was the boy who answered, About secrets, Dad, and about how much they can hurt a family when they aren't shared. Clara's confession the following night shook the foundations of the Hawthorne family. Sitting in the living room with Jasper attentive to every word, she revealed to Theodore the whole truth about her connection with Hazel and how her own mother had been healed by the root doctor when she was a child. Why have you never told me this? Theodore asked, his voice mixing hurt with incomprehension. Because I was afraid you'd judge me, Clara replied, tears streaming down her face. You've always been so rational, so scientific in your decisions. I thought you'd laugh at me. Theodore ran his hands over his face, processing the information. Clara, my grandmother Emerald, always talked about medicinal plants. She had a yard full of herbs and was always making strange teas that worked better than any pharmacy medicine. So why did you resist so much when Willow offered help? Jasper asked, his voice loaded with accumulated frustration. Because... Theodore paused, struggling with words he had never said out loud. Because since your accident, I became convinced that only traditional medicine could cure you. Spending fortunes with specialists was my way of atoning for the guilt of buying that skateboard. The silence that followed was heavy and revealing. 3 years of silent suffering, 3 years of guarded secrets, 3 years of a family living a facade of rationality when deep down they all carried profound connections with ancestral knowledge. Dad, Jasper said softly, yesterday I managed to wiggle the big toe on my right foot, just a little, but I did. Theodore got up abruptly from the armchair, walking to the window. Outside, the lights of the historic town twinkled like terrestrial stars, and he could see in the distance the peripheral area where Willow lived with Darla. If that's true, if she really manages to heal you, Theodore began, but was interrupted. You'll have to admit you were wrong, Clara completed. And I'll also have to admit that I wasted 3 years hiding something that could have helped our family. In the days that followed, the family's routine changed completely. Jasper continued taking Willow's medicine religiously, and the progress, although slow, was undeniable. He began to feel small sensations in both legs, even managing to contract some muscles in his right thigh. But the family's happiness was interrupted when Dr. Arthur Peterson, the doctor who had been treating Jasper for 3 years, appeared at Theodore's factory on a rainy April morning. Theodore, we need to talk, said the 58-year-old doctor, entering the office without ceremony. His graying hair was wet from the rain, and his eyes showed a poorly disguised irritation. Of course, doctor. About what? Theodore asked, trying to maintain his usual cordiality. About the fact that you're giving unidentified substances to Jasper, Dr. Peterson said, his voice cutting. I heard that a street kid is offering magical potions around town. Theodore felt the blood run cold in his veins. How did you find out about this? Asheville is a small town, Theodore. People talk. Dr. Peterson approached the desk. And what they're saying is that you're putting your son's life at risk with quackery. Quackery? Theodore stood up, feeling an anger he hadn't experienced in years. Doctor, with all due respect, in 3 years of treatment with you, my son hasn't had a single real progress. And you think an uneducated child is going to achieve what years of modern medicine haven't? Dr. Peterson laughed with disdain. Theodore, you're an intelligent man. Don't be carried away by desperate illusions. At that moment, something inside Theodore broke. The doctor's words echoed the same ones he himself had thought weeks ago, but now they sounded empty, arrogant, closed to possibilities that science did not yet understand. Dr. Peterson, Theodore said, controlling his voice, I appreciate your 3 years of dedication to my son's case. But I think it's time to explore other alternatives. The doctor's face transformed, passing from irritation to something close to fury. Other alternatives? Theodore, if you continue with this insanity, I'll be forced to take legal measures to protect the child. Legal measures? Theodore approached the doctor, his imposing height making Dr. Peterson take a step back. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, the doctor replied, adjusting his white coat. This girl and whoever is behind her represent a danger to public health. I won't allow her to spread her primitive practices through my town. The doctor's words revealed more than he intended. Your town? Theodore questioned. Interesting how you refer to Asheville. Dr. Peterson realized his slip, but it was too late. What I mean is that, as a health professional responsible for this region, I have a duty to monopolize treatments, Theodore interrupted. To ensure that no one seeks alternatives that don't go through your office? The doctor left the office without saying goodbye, but his last words echoed in the air like a threat. You'll regret this decision, Theodore. That afternoon, when Theodore arrived home, he found Willow playing in the backyard with Jasper. The girl had brought some plants she had gathered near the creek and was teaching the boy to identify their medicinal properties. This here is field arnica, Willow explained, holding a small yellow flower. It's good for healing wounds inside and out. Granny Hazel said it talks to the muscles and asks them to remember how to work. Jasper held the plant with reverence, as if it were a treasure. And this one? He asked, pointing to an herb with pointed leaves. That's Stonebreaker, Willow replied. It's tough, breaks everything that's too hard in the body. Granny used it to cure kidney stones, but it also works to soften muscles that have forgotten to move. Theodore watched the scene from the kitchen window, where Clara was preparing dinner. There was a peace in the yard that contrasted brutally with the tension he had been carrying since the conversation with Dr. Peterson. She really is special, Clara murmured, joining her husband at the window. Dr. Peterson was at the factory today, Theodore said. He knows about the treatment. Clara dropped the wooden spoon into the sink. What did he say? Threatened to take legal measures if we continue. Said Willow represents a danger to public health. My God, Clara whispered. What now? Before Theodore could answer, Willow appeared in the kitchen, as if she had sensed the tension in the air. The bad doctor found out, didn't he? She asked, her voice small but determined. Theodore knelt down to be at the girl's height. How do you know? Because Darla told me he did the same thing to Granny Hazel a long time ago, Willow replied. He's afraid people will find out there's a cure without needing him. Willow, aren't you afraid? Clara asked. The girl thought for a moment before answering. I am afraid, pretty lady. But Granny Hazel taught me that when you help someone with a clean heart, nature protects you too. At that moment, Jasper entered the kitchen in his wheelchair, but something was different. He was smiling in a way his parents hadn't seen in 3 years. Dad, Mom, you need to see this, he said, positioning the chair near the kitchen table. Under the watchful eyes of his family and Willow, Jasper placed his hands on the edges of the chair and slowly began to stand up. His legs trembled violently, his muscles protested, but for a few precious seconds he stood alone. My son? Theodore murmured. tears welling up uncontrollably. "I did it," Jasper whispered, sitting back down before his legs gave way completely. "I managed to stand up." Willow clapped, jumping for joy. I knew it would work." But the celebration was interrupted by the ringing of the telephone. Clara answered, and her expression gradually changed from joy to concern, then to total panic. "It was Darla," she said after hanging up. "Dr. Peterson was there today. He said he was going to report Willow to the authorities for practicing medicine without a license." The silence that followed was deafening. Willow, who moments before was radiant with happiness, now looked at the floor with a heartbreaking sadness. "It's going to be like what happened with Granny Hazel," she murmured. "He won't let me help anyone else." Theodore felt a fury rising in his chest like he had never experienced. Seeing that innocent child being persecuted by the same man who had failed to cure his son for 3 years awakened something primitive and protective in his soul. "No," he said, his voice filled with determination. "This time it will be different. This time, someone will fight for you." The next few days were an emotional roller coaster for the Hawthorne family. Theodore had hired a lawyer to protect Willow from any legal action Dr. Peterson might try to take, while Jasper continued to make impressive progress with the treatment. The boy could already stand for almost a minute and had begun to take small steps, supported by the parallel bars that Theodore had installed in the backyard. But it was on a May morning, during a typical mountain thunderstorm, that everything changed forever. The heavy rain had left the town without electricity, and the family was gathered in the candlelit living room when Willow arrived soaked, carrying an old wooden box. "Darla told me to bring this," the girl said, wringing water from her hair. "She said it's time for you to know the whole truth." Theodore helped Willow dry off, while Clara warmed milk on the wood stove. The wooden box was in the center of the living room table, seeming to hold secrets that had waited decades to be revealed. "What's in there?" Jasper asked, curious. Willow opened the box with careful reverence. From inside, she took out old photographs, letters yellowed by time, and a small, worn leather notebook. But what drew the most attention was a black-and-white portrait of 2 young women, smiling, in front of a house that Theodore recognized immediately. "That house. It's my grandmother Emerald's house," he murmured, taking the photograph. "This here is Granny Hazel," Willow said, pointing to one of the women in the photo. "And this is your great-grandmother Emerald." Clara approached, holding a candle to better illuminate the image. They really were friends. "More than friends," Willow said, opening the leather notebook. They were sisters at heart and shared all their knowledge about healing plants. Theodore leafed through the notebook, recognizing his grandmother Emerald's careful handwriting on the pages filled with recipes for natural remedies, drawings of plants, and notes about their medicinal properties. "But how did this notebook end up with Hazel?" he asked. Willow took a deep breath, as if she were preparing to reveal the greatest secret of all. "Because when Emerald got very sick, she asked Granny Hazel to take care of all their knowledge, and she asked for a promise." "What promise?" Clara asked, sitting next to the girl. "That if one day the Hawthorne family needed help, Granny Hazel or someone she taught should help," Willow replied. "Emerald knew that one day you would forget where you came from, would turn your backs on ancient wisdom." Theodore felt a shiver run down his spine. "Are you saying that you came to us because of a promise made decades ago?" Willow nodded. "Granny Hazel told me about the promise in her last days of life. She said that when I found a Hawthorne suffering, I should help. And when I saw the boy Jasper in the park, alone and sad, I knew it was time." At that moment, a loud thunder echoed through the house, and the light of a flashlight appeared in the window. It was Darla, walking through the rain with a large umbrella. "Can I come in?" she asked, knocking on the door. Darla came in, taking off her soaked raincoat, her eyes shining with a determination that the family had never seen before. "It's time for you to know everything," she said, sitting in a chair near the table. Dr. Peterson is not just an arrogant doctor, he is the son of the doctor who persecuted Hazel 15 years ago. The silence in the room was total, except for the sound of the rain beating on the roof. Dr. Jonathan Peterson, father of the current Dr. Arthur Peterson, arrived in Asheville in the 90s, determined to modernize the region's medicine, Darla continued. He saw root doctors and healers as obstacles to progress. And he persecuted Hazel for that? Theodore asked. Worse than that, Darla replied, her voice loaded with old hurt. He falsified medical documents, invented cases of poisoning, bribed health officials to create a case against Hazel. Clara covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. And no one defended her? We tried, but Dr. Jonathan was influential, had connections in Atlanta, Darla said. Hazel was kicked out of town on a cold July night, carrying only a suitcase and a broken heart. And does Dr. Arthur know about this? Jasper asked. Not only does he know, he's repeating his father's strategy, Darla replied. Yesterday, he went to the police station to file a formal complaint against Willow, accusing her of practicing medicine illegally. Theodore stood up abruptly, anger seething in his chest. He won't succeed, not this time. At that moment, Willow approached Theodore and held his hand. Uncle Theodore, there's more a thing you need to know. What is it, little one? Willow returned to the box and took out an old yellowed birth certificate. Granny Hazel wasn't just friends with your great-grandmother Emerald. They were cousins. Theodore took the document with trembling hands, reading the full name. Hazel Hawthorne Santos. Hawthorne? Clara murmured. Hazel was your great-grandmother Emerald's cousin, Willow explained. That means I'm also part of your family. I'm your distant cousin. The revelation struck Theodore like lightning. Willow wasn't just a special girl who had appeared to help Jasper. She was family, blood of the same blood, descended from the same lineage of healers and plant knowers that had been forgotten for generations. That's why you could feel what Jasper needed, Clara said, tears streaming down her face. That's why you knew about our pains. Families always feel each other's pains, Willow replied simply. Even when they forget their family. At that moment, the electricity came back on, illuminating the room and revealing the emotional faces of everyone present. But the light also brought reality back. Dr. Peterson still represented a real threat to Willow. We need to do something, Theodore said, determined. I won't let history repeat itself. I have an idea, Jasper said, surprising everyone. What if we do the opposite of what they expect? What if, instead of hiding, we show the whole town what's really happening? What do you mean? Clara asked. A public demonstration, Jasper explained, his eyes shining with determination. Dr. Peterson is spreading that Willow is dangerous, that her treatments are quackery. What if I showed everyone that I can walk? Theodore initially hesitated, but then understood the genius of his son's proposal. A demonstration in Central Park, in front of the whole town. Exactly, Jasper said. And when Dr. Peterson tries to contest it, we present all this evidence about what he and his father did to Hazel. Darla smiled for the first time since she had arrived. Hazel always said that the truth has its own strength. When it appears, no lie can stand. 3 days later, on a sunny Saturday morning, half the population of Asheville was gathered in Central Park. Theodore had used his influence as a respected businessman to organize the event, presenting it as a celebration of integrative medicine. Dr. Peterson arrived, accompanied by 2 health officials from the region, clearly expecting to catch Willow in some irregular practice. But what he found was very different. In the center of the park, before hundreds of people, Jasper Hawthorne rose from his wheelchair and took his first complete steps in 3 years. They weren't firm or coordinated steps, but they were true steps, taken with the strength of his own legs. The silence of the crowd was broken by emotional applause as Jasper walked 15 feet to where Willow was waiting for him with open arms. The girl hugged him and both cried with joy as the whole town witnessed the miracle. "This is impossible," Dr. Peterson murmured, but his voice was drowned out by the celebration cries of the crowd. It was then that Theodore climbed onto the makeshift gazebo and told everyone the true story of Hazel Hawthorne Santos, of how she had been wronged and expelled from the town for practices that never harmed anyone. He presented the documents, the photographs, and mainly he presented Willow as the guardian of an ancestral knowledge that belonged to that community. When he finished speaking, Dr. Peterson had disappeared silently, knowing that his version of the facts would never be accepted in the face of such compelling evidence. 6 months later, Jasper was running through the backyard, his legs fully healed. Willow officially lived with the Hawthorne family, who had initiated the procedures to legally adopt her. In the back of the yard, Theodore had created a medicinal garden where Willow cultivated the plants she had learned from Hazel, and 3 times a week she offered free treatments to people in the region who sought natural healing alternatives. Dr. Peterson had left town after an investigation revealed irregularities in his medical practice. The new doctor who had arrived to replace him was a young recent graduate who believed in integrative medicine and worked in partnership with Willow. On a Sunday afternoon, while Clara played piano in the living room and Jasper played in the backyard with the friends he had rediscovered, Theodore watched Willow teach a group of children about medicinal plants. "This here is field arnica," explained the girl, now 5 years old and with neatly combed hair, but maintaining the same special wisdom in her eyes. "It talks to our wounds and asks them to heal faster." Theodore smiled, realizing how life had come full circle. Willow had arrived to the family as a stranger, offering a mysterious potion, but in reality had always been family. She had brought back not only the cure for Jasper's legs, but mainly the cure for a family that had forgotten its own roots. That night, when everyone was sleeping, Theodore went out to the yard and looked at the stars that shone over Asheville. He whispered a prayer of gratitude to his great-grandmother Emerald and to Hazel, the 2 wise women who had planted seeds of knowledge that germinated decades later in the form of a brave 4-year-old girl. The Hawthorne family was complete again, reunited not only by blood, but by love, by truth, and by the ancestral wisdom that should never have been forgotten. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.